Hello there everyone and welcome back to another episode of From Start to Finish. In this episode I will be working on a Napoleonic era battle that takes place in the winter of 1812, and it's going to be the French versus the Russians. It's going to be a very exciting episode. If you guys are new to the series, essentially I take you guys from start to finish, the planning phases of the mock, all the way through me building to the very end and setting up all the figures and giving you guys a rundown on the figures. I normally cover historical time periods during this series. I've covered medieval Japan with the samurai era build, I've covered World War II with the Pacific Theater and the Eastern Front, and I wanted to try something new with the Napoleonic era in this episode. So it's a very exciting episode, and without any further ado, let's get started. Alright guys, so I'm going to go ahead and lay out the idea for the mock. As you can see, I've already got started. I kind of wanted to build something to show you guys what I was thinking and to try to cut down on how long some of my explanations can be for plans on the mock. I'm just going to keep this short and kind of develop the idea as I go along. But essentially, I've got two trees where I want to have kind of there and some frozen ponds over here. There's going to be a main road right down the middle over here, and then over here on this end I want to have some sort of trench or something like that. And I'll go ahead and talk about everything that I've built so far, but the main idea and inspiration behind this build is Napoleonic's retreat through Russia during the winter of 1812, and when he was retreating from Russia, a lot of his men, it was a horrible retreat. You guys can look up on some of it. A lot of men lost their lives just on the road due to the weather conditions and food conditions and resources and all sorts of stuff like that. So what I'm going to show in this mock is like this main road that the French were traveling along, and then they got ambushed, or like these Russians just caught up with their convoy of troops, so they'll just be walking over through this path, getting ambushed by the Russians, and then there's some sort of trench right here as they're all trying to run away from the oncoming Russian forces. So that is the quick layout for the mock. Now we'll go ahead and show you guys what I've got so far. Alright guys, the first thing that I worked on here was this little pond area, kind of like a frozen pond. Found some really cool ways to make this thing look really good, and I found this color palette between this light blue and the snow color, which would just be the white, that I felt like really meshed well together. So using these these trans light blue 1x2 tiles mixed with this snow actually looks really cool and pleasing in my opinion. And then underneath it, to give it even more of a bright blue, I put a certain color of blue plates underneath. It's about the lightest version of blue you can find, I think, in Lego. Unfortunately, I didn't have a ton. That's why these ponds are going to be so small. But I thought this would be kind of cool, like a frozen pond area with some ice and kind of cracks and stuff like that. So that's kind of the idea behind this little pond. Here's the other one. You can see kind of right here, I've actually got multiple different colors of blue underneath the tiles to give it different layers of depth. So there's different spots that kind of show different depths of the water. So some light blue and some dark blue and some translucent blue all mixed in to kind of give it this cool, unique look to make it seem like there's lots of depth and different water levels for that particular pond right there. So those are the two things that I got done. Next, I added in two trees. Now this is the design that I've been using for pretty much all the episodes on From Start to Finish. I just really like this tree design, and I've got all the pieces for it, which are nice. The only different things for this tree are all these white pieces to kind of make it look like there's snow on the leaves. This tree on the right actually is a lot different. Each of the branches are longer to make it seem like it's a canopy, if that makes sense. So it's kind of hard to see even back there, but each of the branches are extended quite a bit to make the canopy seem wider and larger compared to the smaller branches over on this side. So that was something I was messing around with. And over here we've got a start on the main road here. I'm using dark brown. I actually think that color also looks really good with white, kind of like the underlayer of the snow, like in the dirt and the mud. I think it kind of gives it that like interesting feel of like it being like this really deep down, slushy, really dark mud that makes it really hard to walk through. I feel like that's kind of the vibe that this color gives off, and I'm kind of making little snow mounds around the outside of the path like that to kind of feel like this dark brown is like underneath the snow kind of. So I think this path is actually looking pretty good, and I think it's going to look really good when I extend it all the way across. But this is the first couple plates that I've got covered here. I'm going to continue it throughout the rest of the build, so I'll update you guys when I have some more progress. Alright guys, so I was thinking about having a trench in the mock, and I've kind of started to play around with some designs, and this is what I have come up with here. We'll see how it looks from this camera angle, but definitely I'll be setting this up soon in the mock, and that'll give us a better look. But essentially you can kind of see what I've got going on here is using these kind of slope pieces, these very small slope pieces. Let me see if I can grab one. It's one of these. I don't know the exact name with it, but it's like the size of a 1x2 plate, kind of like a slope piece. And essentially what I've done is started to kind of stack them up, and you can see some of the filler plates behind there, but stack them up to kind of make them go up and up and up, and then have kind of a meeting point at the middle. So it slopes up to the middle and then slopes back down on the other side, and it kind of gives, and you can see I've got a curve going on with this kind of design, and there's no like illegal or kind of like illegal techniques or bad like hard techniques in here. This is very simple, but it gets that curve. So a lot of the times when you're trying to make curves or interesting shapes in Lego, you kind of have to use these interesting techniques that sometimes don't hold super steady or are just hard to do or don't feel exactly correct for what you're building. But this was pretty simple because all I did was just connect all of them with 1x2s, and it ended up working, and it's curved. So I think this works fairly well. I've made 2 of them and they're the exact same. So I'm going to go ahead and continue working, and once I get to the spot that I need to be, I will place these in the MOC and we'll get an updated view, and we'll make an assessment and see if this looks good in the MOC. Alright guys, so I did a little bit more work on the path right here. I just showed you guys previously I had this section done, so we're moving along here, and I've actually started to do a lot more of it, and I've got it all the way down towards the end over there, and I've got all the individual snow mounds and pieces using a bunch of different slope pieces and all sorts of things like that to kind of make it seem like the snow is kind of covering the path. So that is now going all the way along the path that way, and it goes all the way across, so I think it's looking pretty good. Also, if you can see back there, it's a little hard to see, but I've started to do a few mounds of terrain all over the place underneath the trees just to give it a little more texture and depth when you're kind of looking at it. I have also started to put some reddish brown and more dark brown elements in there as well to make it like kind of like a muddy snow, if that makes sense. So snow that's kind of been walked on and melted slightly so that it's still a little muddy, but obviously still frozen enough to freeze over lakes and stuff, but still muddy from all the different armies like walking through it and everything like that. So started to add little mounds of terrain all over the place, but I wanted to show you guys that the pathway / road is looking pretty close to being complete. Alright, so next thing that I've done right here, so I've kind of flipped the MOC around, and this was the main path that way, as I started to work on this whole section over here. So you can see on this side I've started to have the path kind of connect over this way. This is the next big thing I'm going to work on, is all the terrain over here. But as you can see on this corner of the MOC, it's a little starting to blend in with each other, but I've started to make a bunch of slopes and a bunch of like mounds. So I've got slopes over there, and I've got some 1x2s and different plates down on that side, and they're all kind of building up on this little hill, and we've got the slopes over here as well. Here's a little bit of a better look. I'm kind of making a small slope structure that I normally use for like a mountain, but instead of using dark gray elements, I'm using just white. I think now looking back on it, would have been cool to kind of mix dark gray and white together, but this is kind of what I've got going on. Over here we've got some more slopes kind of coming up off the road, and I'll try to get some better angles, but it's just kind of hard to get the camera in there right now. We've got some 1x2s, 1x4s, 1x1s, all kind of leading up onto a hill and coming up top right there, and then obviously the path also connects all the way down here. So we've got the main path, and it kind of splits off and goes this way and goes up into this area, which is going to be where the trench is going to go. So I showed you guys the inner linings of the trench. Those are going to line up here on top of this kind of area right here. So you can see I've laid down some plates, and this is where the inner lining of the trench is going to go, and it's going to kind of create a trench area. So the idea is like you've got this main path right here, and the troops would be marching along this, and then there's kind of a trench emplacement, so like the terrain kind of goes up with the slopes, and there's a little like a gun emplacement up here with trench with a bunch of troops that can be in it and have a good firing position. So I'm going to go ahead and start to attach the inner linings of the trench and see what it looks like. Alright guys, so I've attached the inner linings of the trench to this area that I just showed you guys with the kind of mound of the snow building up. You can see we've got a couple troops in there. I actually really like the curve and the texture that this gives off. Obviously we've got to fill in a lot of filler brick back here, and I'll be doing that here pretty soon. But I actually really like the way this is looking. The curve I think works really well with what I was hoping to achieve with this design. Here's kind of an overview look of how the trench is going to have an interesting kind of curve and structure to it, which is a little bit different than some of the other trenches that I've done in the past. This one will be different, and I think the structure and shape of the trench gives it unique, and it's not just a flat straight trench, it's actually got some curve to it. And I think you can kind of see it back over here, how the way that these kind of pieces connect, there's lots of texture and different lines in between where they connect with these pieces, so it actually gives it a good look and a good feel and texture off the back when you kind of back up and look at it. So I think this works fairly well. Alright guys, so I worked more on the trench, and as you can see, I've now got the top plates put on and all this different terrain elements. I actually started using some studs and different pieces for this terrain to kind of mess around and see what it looked like, and I think it actually looks kind of cool. It gives that same kind of textured look, but with studs as kind of like snowfall. We're going to have some cool angles looking down the trench once I get all the figures set up. Another thing that I did was worked on the terrain on this side. So as you can see, I've got some terrain pieces all throughout here, some different snow mounds and different things. So now this whole area up front in this corner is all complete with different mounds of terrain, and the path goes all the way from the trench all the way and links up back to the main road right here and goes across. And I've put some more studs and more terrain, pretty much just touching up everything throughout the whole build. And then even down there I've started to have some kind of tree leaves, white tree leaves that I thought were kind of interesting. Added in some more elements to the trees and I ran out of parts, so I had to switch. I had a lot of cheese slopes on the trees. I needed to use the cheese slopes for a lot of terrain, so I started putting studs on the trees. But the MOC is pretty much finished at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and start to set up a bunch of figures and hopefully create an epic battle, and I'll kind of give a full walkthrough / rundown of the entire MOC. Alright guys, so I've now set up all of the figures on the MOC, and I've been having a ton of fun setting all these guys up. I haven't really messed around too much with my Napoleonic era figures and kind of what you can do with their muskets and bayonets and all sorts of different things. So you can definitely see over here I started to mess around and have a lot of fun with just some hand-to-hand melee combat with their bayonets and their rifles and all sorts of things like that. So the main thing for this build in particular when I was setting up the figures was I wanted to base it off the historical kind of things that happened during that time period with the battle and how Napoleon and his armies were really trying to fall back and get out of Russia and retreat, and they were suffering heavy casualties and kind of are on the run. So I wanted to show that, and so this battle is showing kind of the Russians, who are the OD dark green, and they're kind of overrunning the French right here. So we've got a lot of the French kind of getting beat back hand-to-hand combat style. We've got a couple of French guys on the ground, and then over here in the trenches we've got some more French troops trying to hold out, trying to cover their comrades as they try to get the heck out of there. But we've just got a whole bunch of carnage and battle going on this build, so I'm going to go ahead and walk through all of the figures. Here is what we're looking like for an overview shot. Again, kind of as I explained, I really had a certain feel and vibe I wanted to go for when setting up these figures. So here's kind of what was going on for this battle. We had the French kind of moving along this main path right here, and then we had a Russian kind of platoon of guys. I wish I had a platoon of these Russians, but I only have like a squad's worth. But I imagine there's a platoon worth of them. They kind of finally caught up with the French convoy and kind of came out of these trees this way and came and ambushed all the French troops. And now the French troops are on the run because they're low on ammunition, food, supplies, all sorts of resources, and are outnumbered, even though I don't really have enough figures to show that. That's kind of the story behind this MOC, again, trying to follow the historical points that happened during this battle. Start off over here on the trench. I'm actually pretty happy with the way this trench turned out. Essentially, I've just got a couple guys in here getting into their positions, shooting over the side. We've got one guy right here who's kind of starting to reload his musket and get ready to fire again. Over here, we've got a we've got a Napoleonic era French trooper right here, and what I've been doing with a lot of these figures is kind of putting these capes on them. So these are like the Lego Star Wars Jedi capes, and what I've been kind of doing is to show like their kind of winter clothing, since they would have some fur coats and such things like that. So I gave him kind of a cape to show his winter clothing, and he's kind of hobbling along like he's wounded, trying to get up into the trench to find some cover. And then over here we've got my favorite part, which is a bunch of hand-to-hand combat. So right here we've got a Russian kind of stabbing this French guy in the back with his bayonet as the French trooper is trying to crawl away and get away from the carnage, but the Russian troop right there is able to get him with the bayonet. Now we've got over here, we've got a couple more things set up, including this guy getting kind of bayoneted right here. I really wanted to mess around with the bayonets because, you know, in this time period of this kind of European battles where they would meet each other head on and they would use muskets, obviously. Normally with a lot of MOCs of Napoleonic era and around this time period, people would just kind of set up their figures in the columns that you see a lot of the times. I wanted to try something a little bit different, kind of show the more uglier side of these kind of battles when supplies are running low, ammunition is low, and the fighting is real close to each other and they don't really have time to set up their columns or lines to really return fire, so it's just kind of all-out chaos. And since their muskets take so long to reload, I really wanted to show what would happen when they kind of meet face-to-face, so that's hence all this hand-to-hand combat. Over here, I thought this was cool. We've got one Russian and a French trooper kind of sparring each other, if that makes sense. So one's just trying to hit him with the end of his rifle, but the French trooper's kind of blocking his hit right there. Over here, we've got an officer for the Russians. He's got kind of a short sword right there, and he's attempting to kind of slice this guy with a sword, but the French trooper is able to kind of stop his swing with his musket. So again, really showing the franticness and hand-to-hand combat going on all over here. We've got some more troops on the ground, and then we go over to this side. And over here, we've got the French kind of captain or commander. He's kind of in charge of this whole convoy of men, and we can see he's got his sword out, and he's kind of taking out one of these Russian guys and about to finish him off with his pistol right there. So I wanted to have kind of the French commander up in the front, kind of trying to help his men as they kind of fall back and get out of this dangerous ambush. Over here in the corner, hopefully you guys can see that, we've got one Russian trooper, and he's kind of getting smacked in the face by the butt of this musket from this French trooper right there. So again, wanting to show the kind of hand-to-hand combat. So we've got that engagement going on right there with the French trooper kind of using the butt of his stock as his weapon there, his melee weapon. Back there, I don't know how well you can see him behind the trees. I'll try to get him to focus a little bit. We've got a Russian soldier back there kind of peeking around the tree shooting his musket, and he was kind of going to be taking out this guy right here on the ground, so you can kind of see him back there. I thought that was pretty cool. Now we'll move over to this side. We've got a French soldier right here who's kind of been stabbed with a short sword right there, and you can kind of see I've added in some of those flowers for the blood effects right there, so I thought that was kind of a cool angle. Again, you'll see I've been putting a lot of these capes and different things on these troops to kind of show their winter clothing. Over here we do have one casualty from the Russians. I don't have a ton of like these Napoleonic era figures, so even though I don't have a ton of the figures, I wanted to make sure to show casualties on both sides because this is kind of a close quarters combat battle. There's going to be quite a few guys going down, so I wanted to make sure that I had some casualties on both sides, but again, more on the French side than the Russian side. Then over here, we've got another Russian who's kind of on his way up to the front to help everybody. Again, I found the Mando capes from the Mandalorian battle pack that came out a few years ago. Really just the right size for a lot of these capes. So this guy's got one of those capes on right now, and then I've also got some printed boots, snow boots for him right there. So I thought this figure just looked really cool, especially with the kind of crystal blue color from those trans 1x2 blue tiles and the snow. I think it all just mixed really well and makes for an epic figure. And then over here we've got one Russian soldier who is fixing his bayonet, getting ready to go out there and help the rest of his comrades. So that is pretty much it for the figure setup. Like I said, I had a ton of fun setting all these guys up. I haven't really ever tried to set up a lot of these Napoleonic era figures, and if I have set them up in the past, they've kind of just been shooting across each other, like across the the MOC or different battlefield. I really wanted to try some hand-to-hand combat, so this area in particular I had a lot of fun. Very delicate, they're all kind of balanced on each other, so if I bump anything they're all going to fall down, but I did have a lot of fun setting up all these figures. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the MOC. I think overall it turned out pretty well. It was fun to work in kind of this snowy environment. That's something I haven't really done before, so that was fun. I think the color palette was my favorite thing to work with like the light blue and the white color palette and mixed in with some of the dark brown. I think it works really well together. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the MOC. So that is about it, and let's go ahead and move on to the outro. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you did enjoy. I had a ton of fun creating this winter landscape for this 1812 showdown between the French and Russian forces. I think the Napoleonic era is something that's covered a decent amount in the LEGO community, but not nearly as much as like World War I or World War II, or even modern combat. So I had a ton of fun kind of building something from this time period because I think it's very fun to study and also very fun to build in LEGO, so I hope you did enjoy that. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the build, but also what you want me to do next for the next episode of From Start to Finish. I know a lot of people enjoy the last couple of World War II builds, so I might go back and do another one of those. But if you have any interesting historical themes or anything like that that you would like me to cover, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be checking out those comments and replying to you guys, and hopefully we'll get a discussion going. So thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for another Muunilinst MOC update video, which will be coming out very, very soon. And as always, leave your feedback in the comment section below. Hope you guys have a great day, and may the force be with you always.